Yes, hello everybody. After a while, we can start with a lecture today. So let's jump within the content. Last time we talked about the circular flow of income, a concept with which we want to describe the development of our economy. And yeah, for the modern circular flow, I started with a historical explanation. We identify four different sectors in general. The household sector, this is more or less where the private demand comes from. The enterprise sector, where all our goods and products are produced. And then as a very important sector, of course, we have the government in between, taxes, subsidies, and so on. And then we are not alone in the world, and therefore we introduce also a sector overseas. And in a modern economy, of course, we have all the connections via savings and investments, and this is done by the financial institution sector. In some textbooks, you will find only banking sector or something like this, but this is much too less because this is financial institutions is also insurance companies, hedge funds, pension funds, everything what you can think of in a very general way. Well, and then we looked at the possible connections between these sectors, and this is just a descriptive way, just how to describe your country and the economic developments, and I put it also in a more readable way here on the next slide. So in general here we have the connections of savings and the outflow investment. So we find more or less here if we take yeah, the general condition that at every sector it has to be that the incoming flows equal the outgoing flows. So at this one we can more or less say that savings equal investment in general. Well, and if you remember your business administration courses and you have made some, I don't know, planning or something like this, then yeah, in general, it would be nice if all your savings in a company are as large as the investments you need. But this, of course, has not to be the case. But here, this is an ex post view. Everything what happens the last year within our economy should be described here. And then this is just a condition. So this is not what I want to, but this is an identity. Well, and if this is an identity, then it has to be that savings equals investment. Well, but if we think of a company, then this is more or less a vision. So how do we get these two things together? Well, since this is ex post, and this you have, I think, when you are talking about a single company also, that if you look then at the 1st of January of the next year, what happens the last year, then you are also identify something like unplanned investments. Have you ever talked about unplanned investments in business administration courses? So these investments also include unplanned investments. If not, what could it be? What what can we understand by unplanned investments of of a company or in general of a whole country? What could be unplanned investments? Yeah. Yes. Yes. And if you think now you talked from the perspective of households, if you talk from the perspective of unplanned investments from the perspective of companies, of firms, what could be then unexpected? This was a good point. Yeah. Okay. So you have already the macro view. Okay. But if you take the micro view or the business administration, only you are running a single company. Of course, there could be some earthquake or anything else. But what could be in general if there's no earthquake? Yeah, 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 yeah. Something like this, or you are producing your goods and you want to sell them, and maybe your price is too high. And if we are in Germany, still we are producing many cars, and if I can't sell my cars, what happens? They are just in my hold. They are standing there because I haven't sold them. But they are still there. I produced them, and this, what I couldn't sell, this is then my unplanned investment. Well, I started car company. I'm producing, I don't know, 200,000 cars, or I plan to produce these cars and also to sell them in this year. And then maybe I'm selling only 80,000. And this is then, of course, my unplanned investment. And this I find also then here if I describe my all of my connections between the single sectors. So, for example, not sold goods. And therefore, then, of course, if you take this also within the investment, then you have this identity. And this you have to keep in mind because quite often if we talk about investments, then in general, if we not further specify it, we only think of planned investments. But here in this ex post view, into behind, then we also include these unplanned investment. Okay, and then to end this is yes, in general, you will find at least for all developed countries the so-called national account system, and there you find all these information about, well, how many subsidies is a country paying to its households, what is the amount of private consumption, and in a minute we come to the numbers for Germany. And all this you find in the national account system. So this is then the system for more or less as you do it in your in your company when you have your own books and you are looking in. This system is then for the whole country, the national account system. And of course, from this you get the information. And I showed you that I'm doing this every 3 months. We are doing then, relying on these numbers, a forecast of economic growth. And what is also really important is, with these numbers we can make international comparison between the economic development of different countries. Oh, this has to be outside. So, and yeah, in order to make these international comparison, then, yeah, so to speak, you have to do it, the description, in the same way as possible in every country. And at least for Europe, we standardized these account systems for our countries. Well, also the United States, Canada, and other developed countries, they all have, yeah, quite the same counting there. But especially if you are going to developing countries, India, or especially China, and then you think, well, I'm just looking up the numbers there, and take especially a country like China, then you could think that, well, if I find their numbers about unemployment or inflation or something like this, is this really a true descriptive number? And then we have to admit that you find, especially for China, that almost every time the inflation rate is where the target of the government of the inflation rate has set. Well, is this then true? Maybe not. Or in the most cases, it will not be. Um, the real number will not be there, but this you also always have to keep in mind when you are looking up countries. Can I really rely on these numbers? Well, and of course, although we standardized this in the European Union, in the aftermath of the financial crisis, then we had the European debt crisis, and especially we had this huge problem in Greece. Well, and the numbers of economic growth, of inflation, of investment, and so on, this, yeah, were more or less some numbers which were had actually nothing to do with reality, what they have done there during the first 10 years of the new millennium in Greece. They put just any numbers there, and then it was, I think, until 2016 or so. There, then you also didn't found numbers for economic growth in the European Statistical Office, Eurostat, for Greece, because they had to restart all the calculations and, yeah, then filled in the numbers for the first 10 years from 2000 to 2010, what could have been the real numbers for Greece. Okay, so this is then, yeah, the possibility with the circular flow. And if you go to the national statistical offices, in general, the national account systems, how we describe our economy and where do we find the data for this description. And now we yeah, want to start with the still most important economic number. Well, of course, you can criticize this concept of gross domestic product, but when we are talking about economic growth, then we mean a change of the gross domestic product within a country. And especially, and we come maybe also today to this, of the real grow domestic product or grow national product. And yeah, actually, you can, of course, criticize this concept because then the economists want to describe everything and putting the whole country in one number, and this number is also then measured in euros, in US dollars or something. So we are measuring everything in money. And actually, you can criticize this concept, and you should criticize this concept in to condense a whole country within only one number. But what I have to admit is that give me a better concept. And still we haven't found any better concept. There are something like the Human Development Index and something else where you also include something like how good, so to speak, is the health system in the country, how good is the education and so on. But then always you discuss more or less the weights which feed in. Well, what should be the weight in such a human development index of education? Maybe 20%, maybe 25%. Well, then you ask some experts and they say, yeah, let's do 22%. And for the health system, this should have a weight of 10% or something like this. And then you always have to ask experts or you have to ask yourself, while these measuring economic performance via the gross domestic product, what then feeds in is just the prices of all our goods we are producing and which the goods we are buying. Well, and this is maybe, yeah, some general measurement where everybody can say, well, I don't have to ask anybody else because I bought this car for this price by my own. And so maybe this price process, you know, from other lectures, supply, sorry, and demand. So prices for measuring the gross domestic product come from the market process. And then you can more or less interpret these prices as the weights of the production sector, of private consumption, and so on. So, and how is this gross domestic product our central number in describing the economic performance? How is this defined? And yeah, there are some concepts you really have to learn and you really have to keep in mind. So the gross domestic product is the total market value. So to speak, for every product I produced and I sold last year, I take the price and the quantity. Price times quantity is then the total market value of all, and this is important, finished goods and services produced within the country's borders. So if we, for example, take Germany, hopefully, no, this doesn't look good. maybe Germany looks like this. So I put more or less a fence. On Germany, and then I looked for every goods and services which we have produced within the country's borders in a specific time period. And you find numbers for quarters, but in general, if we are talking what was the gross domestic product of a country, then in general, we talk about what has happened in the last year. Well, and then you could also think of another concept, because I think here we have also international students. But in general, if we talk about a country, then maybe the first idea is geographically. So this would be this concept. But from an economic perspective, we could also say, well, who is producing all these goods and services? This is the people. And then you think of, well, a country is also represented by the citizens of this country. And so I could also define my economic performance, not by taking this fence or this geographical concept. I can also say, what is the amount of goods and services all German, all Swiss, all Italian people have produced in the last year? So So both concepts are reasonable. Well, and then in Germany until the 80s, until the beginning of the 90s, we in general, yeah, when we were talking about economic performance, we mostly talked about the so-called gross national product. But then in order also to compare internationally the economic performance, we in general then started to switch to the gross domestic product. So today, more or less for developed countries, you mostly look on I think these they are already uploaded. No? Let's see. Macro. Oh, sorry. Then the upload yesterday didn't work. um, then this is a bit faster. I just put it in the Moodle course and afterwards you get it. I don't know. Maybe I have forgotten to save the links and firstly closed the program. So then I upload it in Moodle slides and go here, lecture. So then What's happening here? So, can you just give me back that you could download the slides? Okay. So I'm sorry, maybe I didn't saved yesterday the links. Okay. So we were at the point distinguishing grow national product and grow domestic product. And yeah, for this, both are reasonable concepts. In general, today, when we are talking about economic performance, then we mean grow domestic product, but also you always have to keep in mind what you want to describe and what is the reasonable number. Well, for Germany, I already can tell you that these two numbers do not differ very much, because what is the difference? Go, for example, to the Dutch border, 50 kilometers here to the west from us. Then there are some people, German people, living in Germany, working, for example, in Groningen. And the other way around, there are some Dutch people living in Groningen, working in Emden or so. Well, and so of course, these change of these people every day where they are working, then the Germans, which are working in the Netherlands, they are within the grow national product, but they are working earnings in what they are working, they are not within the grow domestic product. And the Dutch people who are working in Germany, these production you find in the grow domestic product, but not in the grow national product. Well, for Germany, it's about 1% difference or so within the numbers. The total number is about 4 billion euros of the grow national product. But can you think of other countries where these two numbers differ a lot or can differ a lot? Yep. Switzerland, maybe, but I can tell you it's not that much. But of course, you have much more people which are, yeah, living somewhere else and then going to Switzerland to work, especially Germans. And Poland, why? Okay, there are also, it, it can be true that it is more than in Germany, but also I think not that much, but it would be interesting. Yeah, it would be interesting to look up how large this effect is. But if you go further and now think for about countries where maybe most of the people coming from abroad every day, a European country. Yeah, Gibraltar. Okay, but this is not a single country, but this would be if we could calculate a GDP or GNP for Gibraltar. Okay, here, for example, it's Luxembourg. For their, of course, financial sector, and they are from France, from Germany, from Belgium every day. The people driving just to Luxembourg. So there is a huge difference. And there is another country from the perspective of companies is Ireland. What is the speciality of Ireland? Pardon? Yes, they have a low taxation, and this has implied that what has happened in Ireland then, because of this low taxation? Yes, they are only registered, and it's even the large tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Facebook, or Meta right now. Um, their European headquarters are in Ireland because of the low taxes, and this was then also the reason I think in 2015 or 16, because then these international companies they put I think it was Apple the patents, um, so their ideas from the United States to Ireland, and then it happens that Ireland had an economic growth only because of this company of more than 20%. And this, of course, then you have also to know which concept is the right one. Okay, but let's have a look at the other parts of this definition. Well, market value, what does this mean? We consider these market prices, but then since we want to describe everything what has happened economically in the last year, then we quite often find goods which were not sold, but they are produced and we have no market prices there. And what do we do then if we have no market prices? Well, also like in a company, there you also start what could be the price on the market, what could be the price which I want to sell at the market. Then, of course, I start what are my production prices. And this I take then, yeah, as possibility to estimate what could be if I sell these goods, what could be then the price. So in this case, I quite often use the production prices. Well, and then we talked in the circular flow about the large sector of the government. And we talked also about that, yeah, many people work for the government. And what is the government producing? Mostly services. Well, and there, of course, we also have no market prices. Think, for example, your passport. Well, you are paying in Germany, I think, for your passport if you have lost it, 30 euros or something like this. But think of all the administration behind in order to provide a passport. This is, of course, not only worth 30 euros. Well, and for this, then, since it's mostly services which the public sector is providing, because of this, then we estimate the prices via the wages of the employees in the public sector. Well, then, of course, also we want to describe everything, all products and services. And again, you think we can think of then, well, how do we get the numbers for all? And especially if you look at the housing sector, quite often the flat or the house is yours where you are living in. And if you are living in your own house, in your own flat, then you are paying no rent for it. But still you are using these good, the flat or the house. And for this, then we also say, of course, we have also to feed in this into the gross domestic product. And then we say, well, within this village or this small town, we have a property quota of 20%. Then we look what is the average rent for a single house, for a flat with 80 square meters or something like this. And then we say, okay, we say, although there is no rent paid, we feed this into the gross domestic product via the average market rent in this village, in this small city. And then, of course, there are some goods which are traded in every economy, but we definitely cannot find really the numbers for it. And this we have to admit. And this is, of course, the black market, where, yeah, we can estimate it somehow. And in general, for developed countries, this is maybe roughly 10 to 15% of GDP. But we do not really count this because we don't know this. And then also, I already talked about it, about the possible criticism of GDP. What else are we producing? Well, if the parents educate their own children, I can pay somebody doing this, but in general, the parents are doing this. And this is, of course, also an economic service, a very important economic service. But this we have also to keep in mind, we do not find within the gross domestic product. Or this also we have to keep in mind, because especially in Germany, I don't know, from which countries are you coming? From Russia? Okay. Somebody else, maybe from France? Pardon? Romania. Okay. Oh, okay. India. So then let's take a comparison between Germany and France. In France, we have since 40, 50 years really a system that you, especially as a woman, can go to work, and that there are in general institutions where starting at 1 year, your kids can go there. So in Germany, we started to increase the system about 10, 15 years ago. So of course, then there we start to employ people to do this. And then it directly feeds into the gross domestic product. But didn't we have educated our children before? Yes, we have done it. But now we are measuring it, and 20 years ago we haven't measured it. So a little part from our economic growth, so to speak, in Germany now comes from changing just our educational system. And this, of course, we also have to keep in mind. And then I started for my kids now to be the coach of the football team. And all this is, of course, also something which, yeah, increases the economic performance in a country. But of course, you are not paid for this. And this is then maybe this all we have to keep in mind what we really can count and what is also important but we cannot count. And from this, here you can, since we cannot count economically everything we can, of course, also criticize the concept of GDP. And in the end, we talked about all finished goods and services, since we want to measure economic performance. We really have to keep in mind that this is then total production minus intermediate consumption. Again, think of a car in Germany. Then at first you have to produce the wheels, you have to produce brakes, the seats, and so on. They are then sold to the car manufactories. You have many small factories which are delivering all these parts of a car to the huge companies. And what we then count only in GDP is the last product, is the total car. And maybe not today, but then on Thursday, I show you in the number that, of course, these numbers, especially for developed country, really differ from each other. Okay, goods and services. We already had material and immaterial goods. About the national concept, we already talked. In general, when we are talking about GDP, we mean 1 year, but you find also numbers, quarterly numbers, and then we, I think, have everything of our definition. And please keep this definition in mind, because still it is the most important concept. Anecdotally, I said it is the worst concept except all other concepts. Like I think Churchill said it, democracy is a worst possibility um, to organize your society without any other concepts, like dictatorship or something like this. Okay, so and now we want to ask, how to calculate the number. And for this, we have 3 different approaches. Since market value, of course, we look at demand and supply at the market. And then we can, of course, if in general we assume that we are in equilibrium in the market, then we find this quantity and these prices from the perspective of the suppliers. And this is then called the production approach. So all value added from all economic sectors which are producing goods and services. Well, and then all these goods and services are bought at the markets, and this is then the expenditure approach. So this is then our final uses of goods and services when we are buying consumption goods, when we are buying investment goods, of course, also from the government expenditures, and our connection to overseas with exports and imports. And the last possibility is that we ask how are these goods and services are produced. And for this, we think of the production function. And hopefully you have seen this in other courses already. There, in general, if we think of a aggregated production function, then we say, well, our output y is some function, and we need some inputs in order to produce our output. So this is output. And what are the main inputs in general? This is then capital and labor. And then we can ask, what is the income by producing this output, which is earned by the capital input and which is earned by the labor input. And this is then more or less our profits, and this is then our wage income. So in this case, this is the income when you have your invested in your stocks or you are running your own company. And this is the part when you are working for some company and earning every month some wage. Okay, then next Thursday we will have a look on the numbers, and hopefully it will work from the technical and hardware side a little bit better than today. Okay, so see you on Thursday.